Hello, everybody, and Merry Rostmas Eve. I can't think of a better, more creative title than that. It is one day before the launch of roster sharing in the EA NHL series, a long overdue feature that we've all been waiting for. Very, very soon, before you know it, there will be a tab right here that says roster sharing, and it has been long overdue. Now, obviously, if you are familiar with this channel, I have been doing custom rosters for years and years and years now, for a lot longer than I've been on YouTube or Twitch. And normally, I put out videos kind of sharing parts of the process or an editing doc that recaps every single, move that I make. This year, though, I elected not to do anything related to a roster editing document just because I wasn't sure if I would be done in time before the launch of the feature, because they didn't tell us when it was coming out until a week before it's coming out. So I didn't really have too much time. So that said, in lieu of that editing doc, which would have added hours and hours of time into the process, because think about all the moves that are made, everything that's changed, and how long it would take to document that, I'm going to make another video pretty much detailing everything that you're going to see when it comes to my rosters. Now, first and foremost, I don't believe that roster sharing is going to be either, backwards compatible, cross-gen, cross anything. Like, I think you got to probably be on the console that you got to be on. I'm hosted on the next-gen Xbox, so Series X or S, and you should be good to go. There are people that will be putting out videos probably, but putting out custom rosters of their own on basically every console. So hey, just because you can't get this doesn't mean you won't be able to get what looks to be a really, solid roster set to use, because there's no way that anybody should claim, I certainly don't, there's no way anybody should claim that my rosters are better than anybody else's. I do things a certain way, and as you'll see, you might disagree with the way things are handled, but at the end of the day, this is what makes the game fun for me, so here we are. When it comes first and foremost to the created player list, what I have done for the moment is limited it to players who are either A, under contract already, B, aren't under contract but are former first-round picks, or C, future prospects that are very highly touted. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Second round picks and beyond, I'll be adding those in. And of course, anytime I really update anything, I'll be releasing updates throughout the year. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, you might not see everybody. If it's desired, I mean, here's the thing, right? It's one of those things. What I'll do is I'll go back through, maybe, possibly, potentially here, let's just scroll through these really quickly so you can see overalls and potentials, but then you can't see player types because we got to go over there. You see the problem with trying to showcase a lot of this information. So here, what I'll do is I'll do one little scroll through here, because if you're the type of person who wants to copy this verbatim because you're not on the same console, hey, more power to you. You are insane is the, I'd say, best way to describe that, because then again, some of you are insane anyway, because when we didn't even have the promise of roster sharing, a lot of you went through this process anyway to follow what I did. So fair play and fair enough. So again, you kind of understand who is here, why they are here, and why somebody might be missing. And of course, some examples of certain guys having to be on SHL teams to stop them from being auto-signed in case they're not eligible to be put on a junior team, because of course there is a 20-year limit there. And of course, some people would have been added in one of EA's more recent updates. I used one of the very first updates to go along with this, so the CHL is not going to be perfectly cleaned up, unfortunately. It's one of those things, though, where you look at how long of a process this is to go through and edit the vast majority of the CHL, at least for the prospects that matter, the entirety of the NHL and the AHL. It's something. It's something. It's quite the process. So of course we have to, we have to make some choices. So obviously in terms of draft picks, not everything is going to be properly updated. For example, the Jack Eichel trade. If you're the Sabres and you wanted that extra first round pick or so, I hate to tell you, but that won't be available. But hey, at least you'll have Ryan Johnson and Owen Power. So see, some positives, some negatives. That's how this works. So we're almost through this, and then again, really quickly, I'll scroll back through so that people can get a look at the potentials that were handed out, and then we'll get into discussing other aspects, yes, including X factors and the usage of them. So here, attribute-wise, you've seen the player types for the most part. A lot of these guys are matched up with whatever their player type is. So, oh, Walker Duer, he's a two-way. Cool, so have him be set up as a two-way, right? Like he's going to have somewhat generic stats. A lot of these guys will have somewhat generic stats, unless they're currently on an NHL team, in which case you'll get a look at that information in just a moment. But yeah, so in case you wanted to know what the potentials are for these prospects, we will scroll through every single one of them. But I'm excited, obviously, right? Like this has been a feature that I have asked for many, many years. Granted, I wish EA's standard when it comes to, when it comes to their custom rosters would be a little bit better, so we wouldn't have as much work to do. Obviously, I'm not saying add in like NCAA guys. They don't have the legal rights to do that, but there's a lot of ways that they could certainly improve, and I think you'll get a feel for that very, very soon when you take a look at how I've set things up. But it's going to be awesome. I mean, I know for me, I mentioned certain people, like if you're on PS4, there's a community member within here by the name of AJ. He's doing something very, very similar to this. So if you're on PS4, he's the guy for you. If you're on the new Xbox or one of the new Xboxes like I am, a big shout out to a fellow YouTuber and friend of the channel, Snipe and Score. Make sure to check him out. He does flashback rosters. So for example, he is releasing 2 different historical rosters, I believe, on day 1. And I will absolutely be doing a series with one, if not both of them out of the gates. I might do one and then save the other for a little bit later. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to see what other people come up with too, maybe that I'm not necessarily aware of. Because like I said, just because I have things set up a certain way doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right way to set something up like this. But do what I can to make things a little bit more fun. So we'll go through the rest of these here. I'm going to try to pick up the pace a little bit. Again, if you want to try to copy this, I know it's going to be a bit of a pain, but clearly if you have the idea of copying this, you have a lot of patience in the first place. So we are almost back to the start, and then I get to explain other parts of the process so that people don't necessarily freak the hell out when they see certain things and say, why is this set up this way? Because Lord knows I've gotten a lot of those questions throughout this process, and that is why we are here. So there you go. That is every creative player that'll be on my day 1 update, unless I add in a couple second rounders here and there. We get to the rosters. Now here is, again, where we have to talk. First things first. Friendly reminder. In terms of overalls, I do not decide what someone's overall is. I base this solely off of analytics and numbers. So there is no opinion whatsoever of mine that is reflected here unless you're talking about certain prospect potentials where I do tend to be a little bit more lenient when it comes to giving people higher potentials because I think that makes the game more fun. Whether it be, for example, most first rounders are at least a medium top 6 or a medium top 4. If they're in the first 5 picks, odds are they're a medium elite, sometimes high 6 and high 4. And then I factor in how somebody's done since they were drafted. Troy Terry, for example, was a 5th round pick, but how has he done ever since? Consistently, better and better. He ends up with a medium elite. So you will see some potentials that you might disagree with, and that would be the only part of this whole situation that you could say you disagree with me on, because again, the analytics are based off of the information provided by the likes of Top Down Hockey, the JFresh cards that are out there, which again, I highly recommend checking out JFresh on Patreon. I went a full analytics route with OVRs. Same thing with the player types. It is based off of the information from those cards, as are the X factors that are available here. So Troy Terry, for example, has great defense. So he gets stick 'em up, he gets quick pick, he gets yoink to reflect the fact that he's a great defensive forward. And then he has something like all alone. How do I decide who gets all alone? Pretty simple. Go to NHL.com, go to Hockey Reference, and see who has scored the most penalty shot goals or shootout goals in the past 3 seasons. And if you're up there, you get that particular badge. And that's a lot of what you'll see reflected here. And obviously, I'll go through attributes as well in a moment here too. But that's a lot of why, you'll see someone like Sam Carrick. I have been very, I don't want to say lenient, but for lack of a better term, I'll say lenient when it comes to handing out X Factors. Why? Just because somebody's a 79 overall, like Sam Carrick, doesn't mean that they're not really good at something. And Sam Carrick is a very physical player. So players that are incredibly physical will end up with truculence, with back at you, with bouncer, to reflect the fact that they are incredibly physical players. It makes things more fun to use. It doesn't have an overly negative effect on line chemistry within franchise. Not every line's going to be a +5 because of this. And yes, the one downside might be that some people have slightly higher trade values, but at the end of the day, the trade values are a little bit wonky in franchise anyway. And at the end of the day as well, you could say, oh, well, don't people ask for too much money in free agency? They already do that too. And this doesn't make it that much more outrageous than it already is. So nothing that you see here negatively affects franchise mode more than what we already see, in my opinion, based off of what I saw in my Seattle franchise and my free agent only challenge so far, which are both shorter term series. There's really not much of a difference. And I think you'll see that if you're watching my Penguins series right now. The free agent market's not overly different. The trade market isn't overly different. So I very much stand by the use of using more X Factors. And yeah, certain people didn't end up with abilities, which I'm surprised, like Sam Steele, Derek Grant. Like, they might be very good at something, but at the end of the day, it might not be enough to get an ability. Mason McTavish, he gets abilities based off of scouting reports, as do a lot of people, to try and make these real-world prospects more interesting to use. EA didn't hand out a lot of abilities to a lot of real-world prospects, which led people to be like, oh, that's kind of dumb that they don't develop anything. And yeah, it does. So I gave it to them by default. So that is the setup there. The next thing that needs to be, kept in mind here is that I am applying the analytics information to fit the mold of EA's system, which is, 88, 89 overall forward and up, they're first liners. 83 to 87, they're second liners. So I'm having to take the analytical information and apply it to EA's system here, and that's how you end up with a lot of the overalls. We also factor in ice time. We factor in a 3-year scale. So someone might not be a 95 because they've only played 2 seasons, but they might be worthy of a 95. Adam Fox, for example, is probably the best guy that you'll see here that personifies that. So you have to keep all of that in mind when we talk about stuff like this. Why are overalls the way they are? Because of the analytical information. You might disagree with it. You might be like, well, I watch this guy every game, and that's perfectly fine. But I cannot quantify your eye test opinion into an overall. I can do that for analytical information. So again, none of these are my opinions. If it was up to me, Ryan Getzlaf would still be a 99 because he's gorgeous. Is what it is. So keep that in mind with a lot of it. You have the 3-year scale. You have so much going on. If someone was in the AHL for a season, it's going to have a pretty, drastic, effect on their overall. If it's been like, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, they were in AHL, but now they're really good in the NHL, that overall is going to be kept down. 3-year scale is very important. That way we don't end up with 99 overall Moritz Seider, which he's not that far off from essentially being in that category. And the last thing to remember here, again, I've talked about the overall scale. I've talked about how potentials are decided. Talked about how player types are decided. Talked about how X factors are decided. And then we get to attributes. And this is the one thing that'll freak out a lot of people. You will see a lot of 99s. The reason for that is to keep the key attributes lower like they should be. The perfect example for this, of course, is Connor McDavid. In EA's rosters, Connor McDavid has, I believe, close to a 90 overall defensive awareness. For me, he has an 80, and I think that's worth the trade-off. To have everything else for Connor McDavid essentially be a 99, but to have that defensive awareness where it belongs. And to me, that is very, very important. And I know what you're saying about Connor McDavid and the X factors. I'll justify this. Born leader, in theory, he scores a lot of goals. It makes Edmonton better than they actually are. That's the reason for that. The other ones make a lot of sense, including Quick Pick. I didn't think he forces a lot of turnovers, intercepts a lot of passes, and gets breakaways. It's Connor McDavid. So you'll have to keep that in mind with the 99s. And we'll go back to Ryan Getzlaf because he represents a pretty good spread of the points here. So deking, hand-eye, puck control. Shockingly, those attributes don't mean as much. When it comes to deking, you're not going to see that many more examples within the gameplay of people who wouldn't deke doing dekes anyway. You know, I'm someone who watches a lot of AI versus AI gameplay, and despite these 99 ratings, while they might do a couple more attempts here and there, it's nothing overly drastic. And within the sliders, you can alter how effective the deking is. Same thing with the hand-eye. You can somewhat alter that. It doesn't really have a negative effect on big tipper or anything like that to have 99 hand-eye for every player. Or for puck control, because again, puck control can be affected by a slider. And yes, while everyone has a 99 at the end of the day too, you have those other abilities to help differentiate somebody. And they do have an effect from what I've seen. You have someone with 99 puck control with an ability like magnetic related to someone with no one, or for someone that doesn't have magnetic on. There is a difference there. So obviously too, discipline based heavily obviously on just the outright stat. You know, how many penalty minutes do you take in a season? Offensive awareness. That is more to replicate whether or not someone is a play driver. So a great example here is somebody like Patrick Kane. And people will be like, oh, why is Patrick Kane only an 86? It's called an overall, right? Patrick Kane sucks at defense. So in this, Patrick Kane doesn't play good defense. That's what you wanted. At least that's what a lot of people wanted. That's what I want. So that's how we set it up. But that said, he's still an offensive force. And for example, people will see, why does he only have 75 offensive awareness? Patrick Kane isn't really a play-driving player. Once he has the puck in the offensive zone, sure, pretty much good to go. Hence the passing ability, hence the skating. Trust me, I've seen it in franchise. You can check it in the Penguins series. He still puts up points, obviously. But offensive awareness is really going to heavily replicate whether or not someone is a play driver. I want to mention this as well before I forget. Beauty backhand. Look up on NHL.com and Hockey Reference who scores the most backhand goals, and that is the only ability that allows you to essentially affect an attribute that you can't really change yourself. Like, there's no editing a backhand ability, so a lot of people will have gold beauty backhand to make that much better. So keep that in mind with offensive awareness. Poise, again, is a legacy stat. A lot of people thought for the longest time, and I don't blame them, that's what I thought too, that poise was related to how good of a playoff performer somebody is. That is not the case. That is not what poise does. Poise is essentially left over from the days of NHL 06. Remember, on those old games, it pains me to say NHL 06 is old, but remember on those old games where you had the hero lines? That's what poise did. It made a player a little bit better than they actually were. And they have nuked the effectiveness of that attribute because it's easier to just nuke its effectiveness than to edit it and deprogram it out of the game. So poise does not matter. The shooting stats are obviously based off of analytics. The defensive awareness based off of analytics. Now you will see a lot of wingers with 99 faceoffs. And again, that is to bump up other important stats. For the most part, it's not entirely perfect, but for the most part, the AI, when going best lines, won't put wingers that have the 99 faceoffs at center. There are a couple of examples of it. The Bruins come to mind. I often see them put David Pastrnak at center if you go best lines. But even then, it doesn't really have that much of a major effect. I've watched it in game where it's like, oh, here's a guy who I know has 99 faceoffs, and he still loses faceoffs all the time. So it's not that important of a stat. Shot blocking, obviously, based off of just pure numbers. Stick checking is one of those stats that goes all the way up. The skating, for the most part, is mainly based on reputation. Obviously, it can be a little bit difficult to find the raw information for just who the fastest skater is. And then aggressiveness, checking. based off of attributes, or statistics. Durability, based off of statistics. But fighting skill and strength will go all the way up as well, because again, you can affect how much strength even matters within the sliders. There is a slider that literally has it so that how fast someone's going and how tall they are compared to the person checking them, how much that matters in checking more so than strength. So everything has its purpose, I promise you. And if you have any other questions, feel free to ask away. I have no problem answering said questions on why is this set up this way? Why is that set up that way? But again, I set everything up to have as little of my personal bias involved in these as you would think. And again, there are some ratings that I'm surprised by, right? And we can kind of go over that here. And again, what I'll do, I think, is probably just release a secondary video on top of this one or alongside this one that goes through everything for those who want to copy it over. But, yeah, John Gibson only being an 84. It's a little bit surprising, but that's where he is. You look at Shane Gostisbehere being an 86. It's surprising, but that's where the analytics say they are. Again, you could disagree with the analytics. It's fine by me. It won't hurt my feelings because they're not my opinion. It's just the baseline that we use for this. But Shane Gostisbehere, hell with the season he's having in Arizona, maybe that's still pretty accurate. But you get to the Bruins, and you saw McDavid in a 95, and a 95 is my overall cap still, because you will have players develop even more. You will end up seeing 96s and 97s within franchise. Brad Marchand, obviously been really good. David Pastrnak, obviously been really good. If it was up to me, Patrice Bergeron would still be over a 90. If it was up to me, Taylor Hall would be higher than an 84. But obviously you have his time in Buffalo that weighs a little bit heavy on the analytics side for him, and people will be upset. Charlie McAvoy, 95. Look up the numbers. I'll say he's great, and people will be, oh, it's because you're a Bruins fan, and it's all well and good. Charlie McAvoy's great, and people will be pissed off that he's higher than Cale Makar. But what did I say earlier? 3-year scale. Has Cale Makar played 3 seasons? No, he has not. So otherwise, yes, he'd be a 95. And trust me, in the Penguins series, he's a monster. He's an absolute monster. We're talking point per game pace as a defenseman. He's going to be just fine. Same with the New York Rangers and Adam Fox. He turns into an absolute freak. It is ridiculous how many points guys like that put up. But again, I love the analytical view because you end up getting guys like Pesce and like Slavin who are really goddamn good, and EA will never give them ratings this high like they should. And people can say, as I don't know if the dog barking in the background would have picked up, people can say it's because of, oh, well, they're not actually that good, or, well, it would mess with the contracts, and he would never get a contract like a 93 overall player would. At the end of the day, though, don't you think bad contracts and good contracts are signed all the time? Nathan McKinnon would never sign for $6 million. Oh, that aged really well. Oh, man, signing Leon Draisaitl to that contract. How stupid is that? Oh, wait, it's actually pretty good. So those type of contracts happen. So why not just have people be as good as they should be? Shout out to Darnell Nurse, who can't play defense, but he puts up a shitload of points in franchise still. It's a great example. Mackenzie Weegar is one of the best defensemen in the NHL. He will never get this rating. Certainly, I don't think they'll ever have him higher than Aaron Ekblad. But that is the reality that we live in if you believe in the analytical side of things. It's the same thing with the likes of Jared Spurgeon and Jonas Brodin. Jonas Brodin is one of the best defensive defensemen in the NHL. EA's like, 83. No, he should be fantastic. And in this, he is. And again, with the abilities as well, it gives you the chance to make someone like John Merrill more effective. John Merrill's a phenomenal defensive defenseman. Would you ever use him in franchise? No. If you want to, and you want to take advantage of that glorious mullet, you can do that now. So it's one of those things where I'm happy with how this has turned out. Now, the last thing actually that I should note is that there are some players that I have elected to take out because their careers are in doubt. I will say, Tuukka Rask will be added back in and likely to the Boston Bruins. I haven't fully edited him, but we will likely be adding him back to the Boston Bruins very soon, won't we? It just makes a lot of sense. In terms of anybody else that was here, again, you'd have guys from the free agent list that are signed elsewhere, like Jake Dotchin, that would have been moved over. In terms of any higher-rated dudes, let me poke around a little bit really quickly just to make sure that there aren't other examples. I mean, in fairness, there are other examples that I'm looking for. I just haven't gone through to look at where they are yet. Let's take a look here. They are not on Denmark either. Beautiful. They probably won't be on Finland either, or France for that matter. Yeah, shout out to Moritz Seider, who's goated. He and Lucas Raymond are just freaks in franchise with these ratings. Jake Gardner, great example. His career is very much in doubt. Easy enough. I've already edited him. As you can tell with the 99s, if you want to go over to Great Britain and move him back over to Carolina, feel free. But let's be honest, there's a lot of doubt about Jake Gardner's future at this point. Leo Komarov just went back to the KHL, so there we go. He gets put on Team Italy. Let's see if we can find another couple of examples here for players like that. Ben Bishop is somebody that I'm going to have to edit. Because let's be honest, prior to this week, his career was very much in doubt. Even though they're like, yeah, no, he should be good to go. And now he's going to be going to Texas. So I'll likely have Ben Bishop back on the Dallas Stars before I begin things. Oscar Klefbom, great example. His career, very, very much in doubt right now for the Oilers. Alex Stalock as well. The myocarditis, if I'm not mistaken, that's affecting him and Josh Archibald. I think I've taken them both out and off of Edmonton. Now, you could say that Josh Archibald is more likely to come back than Stalock just because of the age difference, and you might be right. But again, if that's who you're looking for, they're somewhere here in this madness. It's the one downside to how I've edited things and not kept track is, sometimes I got to poke around a little bit and look for certain people. So keep that in mind. The free agent list in a lot of ways is cleaned up as well. A lot of duplicates, a lot of guys who aren't available anymore. I do need to move Pontus Aberg back over, but again, minor player there. So that is how everything is set up. That is the entire process, the thought process behind all of it, the logic behind all of it. So again, if you have any questions, let me know what you think. And once more, I will get back to you as I can. For those of you that do end up checking this out and downloading it, hey, I'm more than willing, to take up some feedback. It won't be for everyone. There might be some things that you disagree with, but that's the thing. Once you download my roster, you can edit it. You can change things. You can do whatever you want. Use my roster as the base layer for whatever changes you want to make. Add in whoever you want to see added in. That's the beauty of it. We have a lot more freedom. We have a lot more creativity at our disposal. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. And I am very much looking forward to tomorrow when roster sharing finally goes live.